Welcome to the Pete and Cindy Show. I'm Cindy Allen. I'm CEO of Trade Force Multiplier, also known as the Taylor Swift of Trade. I host a weekly podcast, Simply Trade Cindy's version, and I am joined by Pete Mento. Pete, how are you today?
Great. Wish my schedule would let up, but I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always
Of
nice to talk to you,
course.
Cindy.
It's always good. You know, I was at a major event to the AAEI conference, as were you last week, and it's funny because several individuals commented that they're surprised that we don't argue more on the Pete and Cindy Show, and that we seem to be more in sync than what everyone thought, which is kind of funny.
I agree. I mean, I don't want to be in conflict with you. So you're a lovely person. I don't want to argue with you. And I'm sure there's things that we don't completely agree on, but I mean, it's a broken, messed up kind of trade right now. So I think we're all focused on the same broken, messed up things in trade right now. And for those, we generally agree.
Yeah, I think so too. I think everyone in trade is kind of like holding hands, saying, "Okay, we'll get through this somehow. We gotta do this." And that's really what a lot of the associations are about anyway, is sharing information. But yeah, I agree. So lots happened this month since we talked. The first thing I wanted to talk about was the Trade Fraud Task Force, which is led by the Department of Justice, announced that they surpassed $1 billion in collections in criminal and civil actions. So these aren't even the customs enforcement actions. These aren't even the penalties that you pay or the customs liquidation issues. These are basically criminal and civil penalties of $1 billion. Did you read that? What do you think about
I'd love to know what they were before because that number makes my head hurt. I would love to know how many thousands percentages higher that number represents, because to me, I think it's just a tip of the iceberg. You know, before we jumped on, you said, what do you want to talk about? I said, enforcement, enforcement, enforcement. And CBP was kind enough to put out a very nice, very well done document last week that the one piece I took from it that said ignorance of the law is no excuse. We are coming. And it doesn't matter if you're the person on the bottom line making the decision or somebody on the board. They actually said board members. And I went on LinkedIn because I've got a big mouth. And I said, I personally can't wait until the first board member does the perp walk out of a hotel or something, because I've heard the stories of board members advising companies to do things that are sketchy. And that's all in notes. That's all in notes. And some whistleblower is going to get a hold of something. And there's going to be some board member getting paid a couple $100,000 a year. It's got a pile of cash, pile of shares that's going to get drug in front of a judge, Cindy. It's going to happen. And when it does, as sad as I will feel for them, I'll be very happy that the government has made that example of someone.
that's funny coming from somebody who, represents trade members. I think for me, the first wake up call was the Chuck Leather. I don't know if you remember that case where Chuck Leather, they took the CEO and prosecuted him. Now, unfortunately, it was overturned on appeal. I don't know how many appeals it took to get it overturned, but they didn't hold him criminally liable, which I think they should have. As the CEO, you kind of have to know what your company is doing. To your point, I think that a lot of companies sat up and said, "Oh, wait a minute. They know who I am. They know that I'm involved in these decisions, or should be involved, or at least aware of these decisions." And with all of the AI information that's out there and the additional information that CBP is looking for importers, I mean, if you look at the executive order, the importer of record, the non-foreign importer of record seems to be the focus, but it also is asking for additional information about the owners of U.S. companies. So that's not by accident at all. I think these board members really do need to understand their compliance obligation, not just for financial matters, but also for customs matters.
There's been a long time, it feels like, that, we talked about it at headquarters, that difference between trade facilitation and trade enforcement, where we did have a very good collaborative working relationship with CBP. Very fortunate, in early 2000s, they kept calling people in and asking questions. It felt like COAC was at the height of its power. They really were being very collaborative. And now I don't think that that's going to be the way things are going to be run for quite some time. And Their tools have gotten so much better. Their ability to leverage technology to identify bad actors is really, and it's only going to keep getting better. And with that, we have a different sort of feeling where we're paying attention now. We're enforcing now. And because we're enforcing now, you need to be on alert. I give the guys at BIS a lot of credit. They put out that "Don't let this happen to you." I don't know how often they put it out, but like there's pictures of people being drug out of their offices in those, and they name names. It hasn't really felt to me in most of my career that customs has been as visible with their enforcement and talking about it out loud. That appears to have changed. And they're naming names, they're talking about companies. And for two people who pay their bills, advising people on how to be compliant, that's really good publicity for us. But I wonder if folks are paying attention yet. How big a name is going to have to be in the Wall Street Journal? How big a name is going to have to be in the New York Times before some of these companies begin to look at trade compliance as a requirement, not something they've got to skirt around?
It's really funny because if you remember, probably 20 years ago, CBP decided to publish a list of companies that had penalties or liquidated damages assessed against them. And it was up for maybe a week. And the trade pushed back so hard because it was indiscriminate. It was if you paid a late file penalty for $200, your name was on there, which happens. That's more of a clerical error type of thing. And so CBP has always been an all or nothing in this regard. We either publish everything or we publish nothing, and they've really erred on the side of nothing. So I'm really interested to see if that changes with all of the enforcement. It seems to subtly be changing. When the trade fraud task force announced it was $1 billion, they didn't name names, but they said it's 1 billion. It's a lot of companies and a lot of major Fortune 200 companies that were involved in a lot of these issues. So I think that it's really moving to that direction. And, COAC, yeah, I was on COAC. We had a lot of say, and I dealt with COAC when I was in the government, and COAC held a lot of sway because these companies had a lot of power, and that power was derived really from politics, I think. Because those companies, the CEOs could pick up the phone and call their congressman and say, "Hey, they're picking on us," or "They're doing this," or "Hey, that doesn't seem fair. Can we get, some help here?" And some of them, yeah, I think abused that privilege, but some of them used it in situations where the government was a little bit too aggressive on smaller issues. But that seems to have waned as well. Not many companies are willing to pick up the phone and call their congressman, and their congressmen aren't really willing to go to bat for them unless they are contributing a lot of money. And it's the money in politics has just gotten so visible from my perspective. It's always been there. I like to say the Constitution was written that white, rich, you had to be landowners, men could vote, and that was it, right? So not a lot has changed. We've fought the past 250 years to get that expanded, but it just seems like that rich and powerful is still very much driving, but not having the influence. I wonder what you think about that.
If you're not, nothing happens in this town unless there's a donor's name attached to it. And the hardest thing for people to understand that aren't, normies that don't work in this town, there isn't a single politician that gives a damn about you. They don't. What they care about is being reelected. When I was at the Willard Building, there was a whole floor where members of Congress and the Senate, they hot bunked it, right? So someone from Congress will be there raising money for 3 hours, and another mayor comes in at the same desk because they're not allowed to raise funds inside the Capitol. So they have to have a place to do it. Some will sit in their cars and make phone calls, on the middle of the street while they're doing it. It's about money. And when you have a lot of money and you're handing it out to people who are trying to consolidate and stay in power, what they want is what's going to happen. So it's adorable. Be as mad as you want. Scream your face off on Instagram. March wherever you want. Unless you're writing checks or causing some sort of financial hardship on the people that do, nobody's going to listen. And
Yeah.
I hate that. I truly do, but it's where we are. And I hang out and get, irresponsibly drunk with a lot of lobbyists, and they'll all tell you the same thing. I'll tell you the same thing. The number of guys that I've gone out to get a drink with in this town that whip out their MX Black card and still feel like they're some sort of crusader would make you want to throw up if you really thought. But going back to your thing about the list, Cindy, growing up in West Texas, we would shop at a place called the Piggly Wiggly. Far cry from the Whole Foods that we have today, the old Piggly Wiggly. And I remember being 6 years old with my mama, and we were picking up buttermilk. I forget why, but behind the counter,
Biscuits. Biscuits, of course.
might have been behind the counter, they had two lists of pictures and names. So the names on one side were people who'd passed bad checks. And so the bad check was on the wall, and then their name, like in, big font, so and so was right there. And on the other side of it, they had pictures of people who had stolen from them. And shame at a very young Catholic age for me, shame told me, don't pass bad checks, and don't steal anything from the Piggly Wiggly, or else your face is going to be up there. And I think there's some power in customs in the government saying, we caught these people. And you don't want your name up there, do you? Because I'm never taking it down. I bet if I still went to that same Piggly, I don't know what it is now, but if that Piggly was still there, I bet those names from 1973 are still up on that damn wall. I bet they never came down. And I think that there are a lot, again, what do I know? But there's a lot of people who are treating trade compliance like they still did in 1992. They never got the memo. So I applaud customs for being enforcers on this. For one reason, I'm sick and tired of running around the world telling everybody to do things right, and someone saying to me, well, it's never been a problem before. So why should I care now?
I think that, "Oh, we've always done it this way," all of us in trade compliance just cringe because, yeah, but this is a different environment, and I think that we're getting our day, definitely. As trade compliance people, we're definitely getting our day in the sun and, having access. I know when all of the tariffs came in, everyone in our field, trade compliance, individuals at companies, at importers, they're like, I'm being called by the president of the company. I didn't even know he knew my name, asking me all of these things. And, it's great when that happens, you have that connection. But once that, hurried, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Response time is over. It's like it's waning back to, okay, you've got that covered. I can put my attention on something else. And really, this is the most, in my opinion, scary time for trade professionals because, yeah, all of those trade remedies have been implemented, but now you're in the enforcement period. And there has been no informed compliance period. I've said we've gone from free trade post World War II to fair trade to enforced trade to almost protectionism. We're somewhere between enforced trade and protectionism because anytime you do anything, there's a threat that it's just going to completely go away. We're going to take everything like the Canadian smoke coming down into the US and the president threatening to assign tariffs because they can't control the smoke coming into the United States, which is just ludicrous that we'd use a tariff in that situation. But that's the first, hammer that everyone is picking up now for enforcement. I just think that's crazy.
I have something I want everyone to do. And, I've had people say, why would you share this? Because I'm as much contrary to popular belief, I'm not a bad guy. Okay. So in ChatGPT and in Claude, I have built councils of elders. So I have one, it's a council of elders that are performance coaches that tell me what I should do to try to get a better career, negotiate salaries. Am I in the right job? Am I focusing on the right things? I've done one, it's a council of economists, people that I have incredible respect for throughout history. And I ask them economics questions. I give them my math and I ask if it's correct or not. And it's treated me very well having this council of elders. I recently made one up of international trade council of elders. I have Henry Kissinger on there, Adam Smith. I put Alexander Hamilton on it, Jagdish Bhagwati, Petra Ravalli, all these economists and people I really have a lot of respect for. And I ask it questions about where the perspective of trade is going. And the reason I've done this is because AI doesn't always tell you the truth. It tells you what you want to hear. Well, these people will tell me historically how they probably would have answered these questions. And when I look at enforcement and I look at trade, I have a new mindset for it. Trade policy now is it's really it's supposed to be, but it's an arm of international relations. It's a projection of power. And the United States is in a position to use it that way. And I feel deeply that the 301s and the 232s in particular are not really about trade. They're about technology policy. They're about export controls. They're about manufacturing policy. They're about a lot of things. They're about political populism more than they are about helping America to be the best trader that it can be. And I know there's someone listening to this or watching it right now, sitting in their car saying, "Shut up, you lefty." And I'm fine with that. Call me whatever you want, sticks and stones, etc. But history has shown us over and over again that the more we walk away from and don't embrace our opportunity to create trade, the harder it's going to be. And the best times of enforcement were ones where it rewarded compliance. It didn't beat you up for doing. We've talked a lot about this both in person and across LinkedIn. The audits are coming. They're not going to hand out this money and not find some way to smack somebody over the head for doing what they deserve to do. There will be some form of oversight to make sure you deserve that money already. And then with the use of AI, it's going to be easier than ever to find people who are bad actors and don't think that they're not going to come down on your head. So as excited as we all are to be brokers and excited as we all are to have the president know our name because we got him back $25 million or 250,000, the winter is coming. The snow is on its way. We're going to have a couple of really craptastic years of enforcement. So get it together.
Yeah, I follow Hugo Paca from True Identity, and he does FOIA requests, the Freedom of Information Act requests, pretty regularly on enforcement stats. And he posted in the last couple of days that 28, the requests for information, have pretty much remained steady at around 5 or 6,000 per quarter, but the 29s, which are the notices of action, have increased by something like 1,000%. Go look on LinkedIn to find the actual percentages. But that shows me, one, they have the data. They know that you have an issue before you know you have an issue because of all the data that they have. They have the AI analysis tools that they can utilize, where before people were crunching spreadsheets and comparing industry information, company by company by company. AI does that for them now. All along, they've known that there was an issue. Now they have the analysis tools to be able to prove it in a much more quick fashion. And that has increased. So you don't even get a chance to say, oops, I didn't do that, or I shouldn't have done that, or it was an oversight, or here's an issue. It is, here's your 29. We know based on the data that we have that you have an issue. And here's the 29. Those are going to go away eventually. They're going to stop just issuing 29s. It's going to go to a full scale audit. And they're going to say, we're going to not only make you pay the duty, you're going to get a penalty for doing this. And we're going to take you to court. So I also believe that's coming. People who are getting 28s and 29s need to start paying attention to that. And, one of the things that I think that frustrates me about trade companies and some customs brokers as well is they think their data is sacred and that no one needs to see my data. My data is what gives me, the competitive advantage. And yeah, to some degree, that's true. Your supplier list, the way you put ingredients together, that's all proprietary. However, Customs has a global supply chain map. We know that. We can see it in the data. We can see it in the questions that they're asking. We can see it in the actions that they are taking. They have taken all of the manifest data, all of the entry data from ACE, and put it into a supply chain map. So if they find someone who has an issue third tier down, they're looking at that spider web of who else does that company deal with. And I'm going to go after all of those companies, and they're going to trace it all the way to every single import that is tied to that third or fourth tier supplier. And many companies don't have that visibility, but Customs does. So I ask companies who say, we don't want to give our data. We don't want our data to help inform a tool that is going to make it smarter, or give my data to help map a supply chain, or give norms, or that data be used in a way that's going to enrich other companies. The flip side of that is you don't have the visibility either. So I like to tell a story. When I was at FedEx, I was the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and Compliance, and we built a compliance tool that looked at actions from the time Customs asked for something at release through entry summary, any 28s, 29s, outreach of any kind from CBP, penalties, post summary corrections, protests, all of that in one spot. And what I could quickly see is that I could see customs enforcement measures because there was so much data across all these different industries. And I could see that. And we struggled with how do we do outreach to our clients and say, hey, pharmaceutical industry, we're seeing that customs is looking at raw inputs into, this type of pharmaceutical overall. How do you do that? So that's where companies struggle with, I don't want my data to enrich another company. The customs is doing this. So do you want access to know what the norm is? And if you do that, it's kind of like that song. If you want love, you got to give love. If you want trust, you got to give trust. Well, it's same thing. If you want the data, you got to give data, and that way you get more back. So I think the issues that I see a lot are you need to get over it. You need to get over my data is sacred because customs has it. And guess what? Other countries don't have the same measures for actually making sure that your manifest data is not public. They don't have the same measures. So you can go overseas and get all kinds of information about what's being shipped and from your suppliers and where it's going. So some of that is, so much of it is already in the public domain.
That's the second time Ugo's name has come up today, by the way. So he's definitely being listened to. I I have a dream. So I'm an economist. I do calculus for fun. I'm a weirdo. Figure out I will figure out CBP. So CBP, I know you listen because you all love Cindy. I will figure out your algo. I will. And when I do, I will release it. And here's why. I'm going to open source this bad boy. Imagine if I were still at DSV or at Robinson and I was running customs. And I said, I've identified the targeting mechanism for customs. I can tell you exactly what gets a 28. I can tell you exactly which one does. And we're going to upload that and we're going to front load it on every entry. And before we process an entry, it's going to have to go through this algo to identify if it's likely to be given a 28 or a 29 because they have all this information. And then we could go to the importer and say, hey, you got a problem. And I can explain to you what that problem is based on this. Why don't we fix it before it becomes an issue? That importer will fire me because they don't want my input. They want their entries done. Why hasn't customs open sourced that algo? So that customs house brokers, so that CargoWise, so they can change their systems to front load and identify it before the entry is even done.
Well, I think two things there. One, you have to have the data to be able to do that. So having the formula is one thing, but having the data to apply that formula to is the secret sauce, right?
Well, that's
So
what the entry is though, right? If I can take your
yeah,
ACE,
but if you only have one entry, that's the norm. You have to be able to compare that entry to all of the other entries of that product to come up with a norm and know that you're outside or you have an anomaly and that it's just like data. You run the data, you look
yeah.
for anomalies.
Well, it's a
CBP does
regression.
that too,
It's a
right? So
regression. So if I
right.
understand the targeting regression, I can determine if my entry is likely to be targeted. That's what I'm interested in.
Right, but you have to know what the world is of data. That's what CBP has. They have the ACE data. They have 30 years of ACE data. They have 30 years of manifest data. They have 30 years of entry data. So they know what is in the norm and what is outside of the norm.
So
That's
randomize,
where
erase
private
names,
companies
and
that's
then
where the private companies have an issue is that they need the data to be able to tell what the norm is. That's where I could do that at a company like FedEx because we had 7.5 million entries before de minimis went away. That was just normal O1 entries. So you can imagine the vast amount of data that I had to say, oh, here's a norm, here's outside of the norm. And that's why I could see that customs patterns of enforcement followed when it was an anomaly outside of that norm. But how do you get the norm? You have to have enough data to be able to determine what that norm is. And I'm not a mathematician. It's kind of scary that I'm talking about norms of data, actually. Um, as an economist who does calculus for fun. But really, that's where a lot of the companies struggle. They don't want to give their data, so they can't get that norm. And it also does impede other companies from saying, I have all the data. Customs has it, though. So it's a matter of, do you want to play or do you not want to play? Do you want to be able to see what the norm is and know where you fall outside of that or not? It's the whole, if you are an anomaly, you're going to get noticed. Just like in high school, if you were the goth girl with all the, black
I
and black
probably dated you.
lipstick, you probably did, Pete.
Probably did if you're
I was on the way other end of that. But but you got noticed. You got noticed. So, it's
I
the
think
same
we're
with
agreeing
data.
and disagreeing at the same time. I think that the power of taking compliance where it needs to be, which is a warning, would be very, very
Yes.
good for the trade. If there was something
Yeah.
that customs could say, we're going to give a feed to brokers or whomever that allows you to identify this is a warning. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it means there's something about this particular entry that would generally catch our eye. Think about what that would mean for trade compliance. And then brokers would be penalized for not giving that warning or not paying attention to that warning. And if they knew damn well over and over again that warning kept coming up and not addressing it with their importer, we brokers have been very fortunate. Right? We've lived in this world for a very long time where we're not held responsible for the dumb things that our clients do. Well,
Well,
it's
right
changing.
now, that's changing.
That's changing.
That's changing.
So by
Yeah,
giving us the data to understand that, I think we become a more powerful advisor.
I think it's also, what customs really wants. They're afraid to say what they really want because when you look at the laws, let's take forced labor, for example. When you look at the law is supposed to prevent forced labor goods from coming in. But all of the enforcement actions around it is to penalize you when you do. It doesn't actually prevent it. So if they really wanted to prevent it, they would give lists of companies who are using forced labor and then eradicate that out of your supply chain. But what they say is you have to do the investigation. Every importer has to do their own investigation. Every importer has to determine who they're using and who they're not using. If they really wanted to prevent it, they would just release that information. Just like when you're thinking about FDA and CPSC. CPSC, I give credit for because they put the violations on their website because it's a health and safety risk. Hey, this company had a recall. This company had an issue. This company, don't buy their baby cribs because they're, your child's head will get caught in the slats. Things like that. They will say the names. But FDA, unless there's a recall, they don't say the name. They don't give you a list of bad actors. And I think that the trade has asked the government, give us a list of bad actors. We won't use them. We will stay away from them. We'll screen for that bad actor. But the way it is now is the law may say you want to prevent it, but the actions of customs and the enforcement agencies don't actually prevent it. They penalize you for bringing it in. And some companies are like, okay, we'll pay the penalty or we'll do it until we get caught, which is bad. It's a bad, but it doesn't incentivize companies from stopping it in the first place.
What's the government's incentive for not sharing that?
Privacy concerns. They are afraid of getting sued. They're afraid of somebody getting on there who doesn't deserve to be on there or who is in litigation. And what if they're proven wrong and they're innocent? And then the government has, basically impeded their ability to transact customs business or bring goods into the United States. So they're worried about that. I think too worried. I know that's going to be controversial, but I think almost they're too worried because if you've gone through the court process and you have been found guilty, you're guilty. Why can't their name be on a bad list? Or if there's, a harm, why can't it be? Or you found to be using forced labor, why not put it on a list? I just don't get that.
It would do exactly what you said it would do. It would stop people from ever buying from them, which is the whole point of
Yeah,
this.
that's the whole
Until they
point.
until they change their name and move to a new address, but then we catch them again.
Yeah, that's that inactive IOR actions or the executive order actions. So I want to get your take also, Pete, on USMCA. It expired. We have a 10-year period where we're going to renegotiate every year. So it's going to be continual USMCA renegotiations, which in my mind will get nowhere. And we'll just end up with the same USMCA levels and duty rates for the next 10 years.
Okay, so here's what I'm hearing, everyone. Here's your scoop for the Pete and Cindy show. The We'll start with the fact that the president of Mexico and Mr. Trump were sitting in the same booth for the FIFA World Cup. The United States has broken down the alliance between Canada and Mexico. And I guess that was to be expected. But here's what the White House wants. They want a maximum amount of value content from China. So they want to say that if it's going to qualify for USMCA, a certain percentage of content cannot be greater than X from China, not from the rest of the world, but from China. So you can still get tariff shift, but you're still going to have to know your RVC, because if a certain percentage of it is bigger than X, then it can't qualify. So imagine someone saying, let's make it 5%. So no more than 5% of content can be Chinese origin. I don't know that foreign suppliers and US importers really understand. They're learning because of the derivatives, how important that bill of material is and how important the accuracy is. And the second question is, who's going to be enforcing that accuracy? The other thing I'm hearing is they want to move away from tariff shift and have more regional value content determination. These are two things that are possible, but very difficult for importers to do. I think that what we're seeing from Brazil, what came out of Brazil, and we'll hopefully see, I haven't got any news yet. The 301s have dropped unless you have, will tell us a lot about exclusions and what will and won't be focused on. But it's clear that agriculture is going to be big on USMCA. And again, going back to our earlier part of the conversation, Cindy, there are certain industries, automotive, that appear to have a lot of regulatory capture on how this thing is going to end up. So the loudest companies, the ones that have the most money to move policy, are going to probably be the ones that see the best things out of USMCA. But it's that part of it saying that only a certain percentage of it can be Chinese value. That terrifies me. And I think it should scare Mexico and Canada too, because so much of the production is either owned by a Chinese company manufacturing in Mexico or Canada, or the inputs are Chinese that are being put into that tariff shift to make it in the US. People forget, see, a big part of NAFTA was immigration control. A big part of NAFTA was people with great jobs in Mexico aren't going to seek them in the US. And all this is going to do is eliminate those great jobs in Mexico if we keep this up.
Yeah, I do not have great hopes that either of those things are gonna get through Congress because of the impact it's gonna have on the manufacturing, and they are just simply not prepared to shift in that amount of time. Now, 5 years from now, maybe, but definitely not in the next 2 years. So I think in this regard, I see a lot of the manufacturers pushing just to leave it as is for the next couple of years until this administration moves, and then let's talk about what's really possible in the timeline that it's possible in. I think one of the things, is that a bad necessarily a bad goal? It depends. It depends on where you think manufacturing really needs to be in the United States and with our partners. Is it a bad goal to eliminate or have some sort of limitation on, labor from other countries? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that we have to be choosy about the types of jobs we really want to bring back to the United States. I don't want to see sweatshops. I don't want to see, I don't know if you were required to read The Jungle when you were in school. I was required to read it. I got about halfway through and couldn't eat until that period was over. It took me weeks to actually eat meat after reading that book, and that was from the 1930s about meat packing and the horrendous use of individuals, misuse of the labor force. And I don't want to see us get back to that. And I worry about that in this big, massive push for manufacturing. I spent 25 years in Detroit, huge automotive industry, huge, manufacturing base with the automotive industry. And those jobs aren't like paying high dollar like they used to. Inflation, wages have not necessarily kept up with inflation, even with the union protections there. So I worry that we're funneling a lot of kids into manufacturing jobs and they're going to be stuck there for the rest of their lives because they don't want to walk away. It's good enough money, but not great money, and it has good benefits, so they aren't going to walk away from that. Is that really what we want for our kids? Maybe that's good enough. Maybe we have to lower our expectations, but Do I think about my 3 kids and where I want them to be? My kids are all, over 30, so they've pretty much chosen their careers, but I think about, when they were in their 20s, did I really wanna see them decide I'm gonna work at Ford or GM or Chrysler on the line, and that's gonna be where I wanna be? Not necessarily.
Problem is not policymakers. The problem is not producers. The problem is the consumer. And Tosca showed me an app she has today that tells her, if a consumer at the store can put in the name of something and the origin, and it can tell you if there's a likelihood that forced labor was used. And she is a consumer who is very mindful of that and doesn't want to spend her money. She's voting with her wallet. Most American consumers do not give a damn. All they care
No.
about is price, not the origin,
Yep.
the price. And until we get consumers to feel a little more ethical about what they're doing with their money, God, this is a preachy show from you and I today. But until we get them to think about it, this is never going to change. It's never going to
Yeah.
change.
I think we've been spoiled by, if you think about the choices that we have and the price, at the price points that we have, we've been really spoiled as Americans. We can get anything from anywhere, mostly at a reasonable price, and we've been spoiled by that. And we forget, after World War II, you didn't really have mangoes in the store. You got bananas, but not all year long.
Seasonal.
Yeah, and there were a few kinds of cars. There weren't, 800 different cars. And I think we experienced a little bit of that after COVID. I like to call it the toilet paper aisle. Everyone needed toilet paper. There was a run on it for some reason, although most of it was made here. It was bizarre to me looking at that. But you large manufacturers looked at what were the highest sellers, and that's what they put all of their production into, the highest sellers, and they put that and got it to the stores. Well, 3 4 years later, they haven't started producing the smaller selling brands anymore. They've streamlined and they've limited the choices. Why? Because it wasn't economical for them to do so, and people didn't really care. They would buy the other brands. They would buy whatever was available. I mean, toilet paper is maybe unique in that everyone uses it. So you're going to buy what's available. But, they learned a lesson that they didn't have to give us so many choices. And I think people, didn't recognize that because it happened subtly. They added a few more brands and a few more brands. But before COVID, you had a whole aisle of toilet paper in large grocery stores. Now it's maybe half, and that's because you don't have all of those different choices. So are we going to get to that, point where choices are going to be limited because of the trade policy that's being put out now? Are we going to be forced to select from a fewer number of products that are made, in Mexico, US, or Canada? I don't know.
I'm going to give you a homework assignment, Cindy. Choose it if you'd like. It's not graded, but go back and watch the first season of the Bob Newhart show in the 1970s. All right. And when you watch it, I want you to look at their apartment. This is something economists talk about, believe it or not. In the 1970s, between 1969 and 1973, the availability of consumer goods drastically changed in America. And it changed because we were importing from places we never were before. And consumers decided they were going to enjoy buying themselves more things. The entire set of the Bob Newhart show, except for the scaffolding behind it, nearly everything was made in another country. And it was a way for you to basically see. You go from there, you move on into shows like Good Times and Sanford and Son. The poor people in this country were still buying American goods. It was something they could afford, and it was long lasting. So they were buying, understanding the long lasting treatment of it. The Bob Newhart show set changed every single season, and it was a reflection of the American consumer. We are the Joey Chestnut of global consumers. We will shove as much crap in our face as we can. Just keep shoving them in there, right? To them for it. And then we reward ourselves for being the best consumer. We spend money we don't have on things we don't need, money we don't have in the first place, to impress people we don't like at all. And the next year we do it all over again. And my entire career, I'm such a hypocrite. My entire career is based on this mass consumption. They don't worry about who made it. They don't worry about where it came from. They don't worry about the American jobs that it impacted. They worry about the cost. And our
Yeah.
job is to make it as cheap as possible and as available as possible and guilt free for the American consumer. Well, guess what? The US government and global governments have decided that's not cool anymore. And if we're buying from someone who happens to be using someone who doesn't want to do the job, your face should be on the Piggly Wiggly counter, as well as the check that you decided not to pass. In comedy, we call it a callback, by the way. Pretty good.
That's funny. Bob Newhart, that used to be one of my favorite shows when I was
It's
growing up
still
for some
funny.
odd reason.
It's still funny in 2026. It's still funny. So watch the
Uh,
first episode and you'll see what I mean.
that is funny. Well, that's about all the time we have, Uncle Pete. Thanks for joining me
Pleasure.
today for the Pete and Cindy show, and we'll see everyone sometime next month.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thanks.